Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for this opportunity to moderate the panel entitled The Aging Society and Development. Is Progress Without Change Possible? Change? What kind of change? Evolutionary, revolutionary, with the help of policies, with the help of legal mechanisms, legal instruments. Our panelists will give their answers and their thinking, contribute their thoughts. Well, I must admit that I'm not neutral to this topic of development and aging society, because I've been involved together with my colleagues for 30 years in older adult education. And what we had one clear motive in mind, introducing this education to former Yugoslavia, to secure for older people the right to be involved in education, in lifelong learning, the right to know, the right to share their knowledge, and the right to use their knowledge. And this is quite often a problem, as we will see later on in the course of this debate. Now, I would like to cordially welcome our distinguished panelists, and I think it will give more dynamics to this panel if you introduced, and more precision, I would say, if you introduced yourselves rather than I do it. Can we start? Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is James Collins. I come from the NGO Committee on Aging in New York. My term as chair of that committee ended last night. As of today, I'm the immediate past chair. I really know, as an American, I was very thrilled yesterday to hear a civil discourse by political leadership on the issue of migration. So I really appreciated that. If you've seen what's going on in the United States, you know what I mean. And I also noted yesterday that the Croatian president was the only leader who really mentioned NGOs in her statements in the conversation. Although I must add that former President Turk did mention it last night at the reception. So. That's the background. I'm going to be looking at things from a global perspective. I know this is a regional group mainly, but I will be taking a broader perspective.
May I jump in? I know it's not very conventional, but do you see any relationship between the problem of migration and old age?
And
old age, older people?
Yes, I mean, there's two effects, right? Both, sometimes they are migrants, and sometimes they are left behind. So it's two issues there. Yes.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Good afternoon to everybody. I'm Vitalia Gaučaitė-Vidiš, represent here United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. I'm a chief of population unit, and we deal mainly with aging issues in that population unit. Of course, we don't shy from other issues, and we are in charge on following up on major summits on population matters like Cairo Summit or Madrid. Since I represent Economic Commission for Europe, it means that I don't speak only about 28 European Union countries, but at least for 56 countries, double that. So we also, our membership is quite extended from North America, as they say, from Vancouver to Vladivostok, including Israel and Turkey. So sometimes in my discourse, I go away from the European Union issues because they are quite well addressed, and come back to the countries that are not as advanced or not as developed in certain matters.
Yeah, and I think this is an advantage to have in this panel a global view of aging, and also particular view of different countries and social situations. Thank you. Mrs. Anja Kopač-Mrak, our current Minister of Labor, and
Sorry. No, it's okay. I'm currently having a post of being a Minister for Labor, Family, Social Affairs and Equal Opportunities. Before and even in between, I am also lecturing European social policy. So I will, on this panel, represent the national level and the view of the national states, and also the level of, politics, but I will address some issues which go beyond. I won't be bored with you with how the politics we are usually the others are seeing politics as not doing enough for those changes, so I will give the view how the changes must go on and how we all need to participate to gear this process, which is ahead of us, and we don't have time to postpone it anymore.
Thank you. You'll be talking about demographic changes from the perspective you mentioned in our conversation just before the panel. Thank you. Mr. Zoran Stančić, please.
Thank you very much. So my name is Zoran Stančić. I'm Deputy Director General at DG Communication, Networks, Content and Technologies. Now, everything is clear to you, but probably you are wondering what am I, and I work for European Commission in Brussels. The reason why I'm here is because we are responsible actually for three issues. One is regulation of telecommunication networks. The other one are digital strategies, in domains of information society. And the third one is that we are also funding innovation and research projects in different domains, including active and healthy aging. So what I would like to contribute to the discussion of the panel is how digital can, on one hand, improve the quality of lives of our citizens, and on the other side, how digital actually can boost economy also in this specific domain. Thank you very much.
Yes, and I would say not only boost economy, but also give a specific and quite a new position of older people in society. I think it goes both ways, doesn't it? Yes, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Alexander Sidorenko, and anyone who is familiar with Eastern Europe would immediately recognize that I'm coming from Ukraine. But I'm here not to represent my country, for good or bad. I'm here in my position, an honorable position, as the Global Ambassador for HelpAge International, the major international, I should say the major, international non-government organization which is based in London, United Kingdom. My professional interests are best served by my affiliation with the European Center for Social Welfare Policy and Research, which is in Vienna, Austria, where I'm currently residing. And I have to be very careful what I'm going to say because the director of the center, Professor Marin, is here in this room, but I will try to obey by. So looking forward to participating in the discussion. I would like to thank also the organizers for choosing, inviting, and bringing me here.
Yes.
I just go?
Yes, okay. Please do.
Okay. Good afternoon. I am Elsa Fornero. I come from Turin, the University of Turin. I hold the chair of macroeconomics, but perhaps the reason I was invited is not that I am an economist. Economists are not very popular these days, but I was Minister of Labor, Social Policies and Equal Opportunities in Italy during the technocratic government led by Mario Monti. And in this role, Minister of Labor, I had to prepare, which Parliament approved, both the pension and the labor market reform. Italy was in a very difficult situation. It was 2011. We were in a financial emergency. And just to tell you, I had, when I asked Mario Monti, how much time do I have to prepare the pension reform? He said, 2 weeks. 2 weeks. 2 weeks, that was the surprise. 2 weeks, 20 days at most. And this we did, and Parliament approved, and the reform was approved in, well, let's say 40 days, just before Christmas. But I want to give you a positive message. I came this morning from South Tyrol. There was a summer school there organized by the Student Stiftung for German students of different disciplines. And in our class, which was about demographic change, of course, aging was the topic. And they had to prepare a manifesto, which is something that they are doing right now, to be prepared by the end of the week. And I followed. We gave them some concepts, basic concepts, and then a bit of framework for them to have, let's say, a more uniform knowledge of the problem and the constraints. And they are to prepare a manifesto for political leaders, let's say Mrs. Merkel, they said. And I just tell you that they were quite positive about aging in Europe, combined with two things. One is migration, which they saw as an opportunity, and the other one is exactly digitalization. So I was very pleased to see a group of young people to be very positive and not to reflect those fears on which some politicians work.
Thank you very much. I'll be coming back to you to see how you interpret age and how to deal with age. But I'm very happy that this summer school gave such positive results, because there are many myths in our societies about old age and also about intergenerational relationships. I think I will turn to you, Mrs. Kopacz, because the issue you would like to address is a wide one, and we'll be talking about demographic changes and the welfare systems and probably the adequacy of pensions and so on.
Sorry, I will try to be brief as possible, but I would like to stress that aging society in its core, discussing about demographic change, we have to address this change within our society as paradigmatic. So dealing with those changes, we need all at the national level as well, international level, and the national level, we need a holistic approach. So we need to first address on different levels regarding the decision making, as well as we need a holistic approach regarding who will be included within those changes. So all stakeholders should be included. If you take that, you say aging society, demographic changes require a paradigmatic change. If you agree about this, you need to address this issue from the point of view that we need a new social contract. That means that we need to rethink our welfare systems, especially we think of our welfare states being based on Bismarckian type of social security schemes, that with those changes we are facing now and will be even more faced in the next decades, we need to think how our social protection schemes, which are primarily based on social insurance schemes, are functioning. And the question is how we finance social insurance schemes. Do we still insist on contributing on the base of social contributions, which are in their core linked to the are work-based, and they have in its logic the meritocratic principle. So if we move from labor cost, which we all know that in the global context we are facing with the competition and everything, the pressure on our labor costs, so what will be the guiding principle within the social insurance scheme if we move from labor to taxing consumption, for example? So that's the core issues of our social insurance schemes. So when then the second step is to think about the rights, our social security schemes are based on the presumptions that they are protecting poverty. Do still protect poverty within the demographic change we are facing if those systems will survive it. So we need to discuss about those issues. And thirdly, it's also important the issue of delivery. What is the best mixture of public-private providers? How the different states deal with it? What are the attitudes, values behind it? So if we address all those issues also in relations which need to be addressed with the changes in the labor market, so then we have another perspective on it with the precariousness of the labor markets nowadays facing with the younger generation. So we actually are in the position that we, as a society, we need to rethink how the welfare states are based, how is the intergenerational solidarity or relations between the generations are structured. And also, I think it's really, if you take these assumptions, I think we need a new social contract. We need a broader consensus about how we see our welfare state in the next 2 decades or 3 decades. For example, just one figure. Now in Slovenia we have the share of older, that means 65 and older, is around 17%, but only in 10 years' time it will be around 23%. So we don't have enough time, and if we are aware that those changes within the pension system, the health system, are quite difficult. So it's really important how we are steering those processes within the society. And at that point, I think that the politics are those who are most important or the most. They have responsibility to gear this process, but nevertheless, the whole society, the civil society, the social partners, as well the scientific community have to take in to gear this process and to discuss it, because in its sense, it's also related to the European social model in its core. So we need to address those issues now, and. With the thinking that all generations have to take part in it and to have really transparent discussion about it. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. You said that the share of older people right now is about 17%. Did I get you? Yeah, 70 point. Yeah. And there we are expecting a much higher share. So policies are not only for today, as you said, Vitalia. Policies are also for tomorrow, and they are anticipating the needs. So one of the needs is absolutely this intergenerational cooperation, not only solidarity, but cooperation. And I would ask you, how do you address, in your organization, how do you address this issue?
I think yesterday we started with this necessity of partnership. And the intergenerational relationships is also part of the partnership. We have to involve all parts of the society in addressing aging issue or addressing population decline issue. We have two in Europe there are two kind of main developments in demography. It's not only aging, but also population decline. In Eastern Europe, especially and we have this migration issue which comes here into, and all parts of society are affected, young and old, the same. So I think this, if we look for the bottom-up approach, if we involve from the community, from the school, from the working environment, all people in civic education, in civic kind of understanding and participation, it would be much more helpful. We do some intergenerational relationship kind of analytical work on to find out how the things are developing these days in the society. And we have the generations and gender surveys. We have quite a lot of sociological surveys that look sometimes separately, look at the older generations and inquire the younger generations. And the United Nations and we are a regional branch of the United Nations, support both sides. But I think if we put them two together, young and old, addressing these issues, like in that summer school, asking them to see the major issues in the society, they usually come with the same issues. It's interesting. At Vienna Ministerial Conference in 2012, we had representatives of the youth, we had representatives of the older NGOs, we had representatives of the academia that work with that, and practically all the issues that they were putting into their statements without consulting each other came out the same.
Yeah, this has also been This has also been our experience in intergenerational events. You know, discussing society, we came to the same issues from the part of the young people and older people.
Young people talk about
and
the
different
right
stakeholders.
Yeah. Young people talk about the right to work, to jobs. Older people say the same.
Absolutely.
They need the right to jobs. Younger people talk about the right to the health services that are more prone to the youth problems. The older people talk about the reproductive health necessity also in older age, because it's not only birth giving what comes. So we have all these issues that they are addressed practically with the same. They are the same issues that address the society, and we have to recognize it. And as at the moment we put together, we find the forums for these young and older generations to talk together and to come up with the policy manifestos to, among the older and younger, I think we will find that relationship flourishing.
Yeah, and what's interesting, probably ageism, at least in these events and these meetings and forums, is not present, or very, very little, or if I'm not right, just correct me. James, you've been dealing with rights of older people and also specific rights of older people, because some of them are specific.
But before that, just to follow up on what was said before, at the United Nations, we in the aging community are approaching issues from a life course perspective. We're not trying to just as an issue of age, but issues of people across the lifespan. We're very supportive of like prenatal health care. I mean, it's, again, and we tell the younger people, one day you'll be old. So our issues are your issues. So again, take the life course perspective, look at it, the whole lifespan. And again, governments have the problem of the allocation of resources. But again, we are all equal rights holders, youth and the elderly, and it's up to governments to respect that. So that's sort of the overall perspective that we're taking at the UN.
Yeah, but whatever we say on the positive side, there is always this ageism issue, which is present and can be detected everywhere, in medical services, in health services, in education, in policies, in arts, in, I don't know, everywhere, finally. do you think that older people are somehow deprivileged and their rights should be formulated?
Again, thanks to Argentina, for the past several years, the United Nations has been considering whether or not there should be an international convention on the rights of older persons. We've been very active. There have been 6 sessions of what is called the Open-Ended Work Group on Aging, where the member states have been looking at this issue. A lot of the member states, particularly the EU, the United States, Japan, Great Britain, all say, no, there's no big issue. We've got existing instruments, that's sufficient. And others take the opposite perspective. And I, in my work, have really been guided by the thoughts of Professor Israel Doron of Haifa University. At the 4th session of the Open Working Group, he gave a very, to me, compelling argument for a convention as the only means at the international level to address the issue of the social construction of ageism, older people as burdens, as undeserving, as looked down upon, as disadvantaged. Ageism is the term that is used to denigrate older people and look at them, and it's a social construct that even older people themselves often take in and express that we aren't quite the same. I'm 75. And again, older people sometimes feel, we're not important, but we are. We are as important as younger people. And what Professor Doron said is that the only way to attack this at a global level, this construct of older people as a burden, is through an international instrument at the global level, and that is the reason to have a convention. Other arguments are that there are normative gaps, that there are implementation gaps, but to me, this is a more fundamental reason and in this regard, I really want to thank Slovenia as the sole member to this point of the EU that is supportive of the convention. Thank you, Slovenia.
Well, Sasha, I think this is also your topic, rights of older people and all the issues around. Could you be more specific on this question?
Thank you. I shall try. I think we have to look into the issues related to the human rights of older persons in a broader sense of empowering older persons. And when we're talking about empowerment, giving power to older persons, we need to consider it from different perspectives or from different directions, domains, whatever the correct terminology. Certainly, ensuring human rights is of utmost importance. And I would say that in many countries, it's a matter of emergency. From the point of view of policy, if there is nothing that in the country, in the government and the policy, which looks into the issues related to the situation of older persons, the first thing to be done is to enact the necessary legislation that would protect older persons. This is what most important in those countries which are affected by conflicts or suffering from man-made or natural disasters, where older persons are suffering very often at most. That's exactly what is intended with this big United Nations project of developing the Convention on the Rights of Older Persons. And I would like to emphasize, and perhaps as a matter of clarification, to say that convention in the international legal parlance means the legally binding document. It's not only to reflect on a certain perspectives. It's not only to list what all the persons are entitled. It's also to engage the international community in providing those rights and also monitoring the international situation at the level of every government which signed and ratified the future document, that it would obey by those commitments which they made by signing this document. It's very different from the situation of so-called non-legally binding document. Why so many, well, I should say, why some governments are against the convention? They often refer to the fact that there's this set of wonderful legally binding and non-binding documents, including on aging. In 2002, the United Nations adopted the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging. One of the overarching dimensions of the Madrid Plan of Action is actually provision of rights for older persons. But what are the results? It's been already, 13 years since the adoption of the Madrid Plan. 2 review and appraisals were done at the global level. And the conclusion is the same. The progress has been limited. Why? All 139 member states of the United Nations signed on this plan, which means they took it to implementation. But there is no legally binding procedure. As soon as the convention is established, there will be also a procedural and institutional mechanism for following the convention. Usually it's a committee, a commission, whatever is decided by the United Nations. So from my point of view, beyond the human rights dimensions, beyond the politics, and there's a lot of politics, of course, in the issue of adopting any legally binding document in the United Nations. It would play also an important role to support and to put some instruments in international activities on aging. It would support the policy development in the field of aging. And we have many wonderful policy frameworks in this area. I mentioned already the Madrid Plan of Action on Aging, which was adopted in 2002. That was a follow-up to some extent to the first World Assembly on Aging. We still have the Vienna International Plan of Action on Aging, which is more than 30 years old. It was adopted in 1982 during the first World Assembly on Aging in Vienna, Austria. Who remembers about that plan? It has never been fulfilled. The progress has always been limited. Why? I would dare to suspect that the reason is that we do not have the international instrument to follow and procedure to follow the implementation. It's sort of an open-ended, but not as open-ended as the European Union procedure. You can report on the implementation of the plan, or you can keep silent. No follow-up. The name of the country wouldn't be even mentioned, right? Vitalia knows much better because she, among her many responsibilities, is following up on the implementation of Madrid Plan in the region of 56 countries of her regional commission. I think it's only 35 countries that submitted their national reports in 2012, if I'm not mistaken. 37. So what about other 19? They're not interested in aging. There's hardly any country in this region that is not engaged in demographic aging, in demographic transition. But it does not happen. If I may, Madam Chair, also would like to mention the third dimension of empowerment of older persons. So the first one, ensuring human rights. Second, implement the policies, concrete policies at the national level, which would ensure those rights. And the third dimension, of utmost importance, of a long-term nature, is ensuring that all the persons are appreciated in the society. That we're talking not only about the needs, but also about contributions. So there's a wonderful United Nations document, another document, quasi-legal, it's not legally binding, the United Nations Principles for Older Persons, which is talking about the rights of older persons, but not about the contributions of older persons. There's nothing about contribution. There's a section on participation, but this is it. So unless we ensure that older persons are seen in the society as a source and not as a demanding segment of the society, which we need to cut a big piece and give them to keep them quiet and happy, we won't succeed in policy efforts to make our society for all ages Society for all ages, as you know, it's a motto of the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, anyway, I think also that older people should be freed of this dependency discourse, and they should be considered in policies and in public as contributors. And this is why we are here today. I think it's the basic way towards development, if we want the development, of course. Zoran, well, your domain is, at first sight seems not so directly connected with the usual issues of aging, but I'm definitely sure it is, because finally all areas of life are connected with old age and older people. Could you tell us about your role, I mean your work, and how it touches upon old age and older people?
Thank you very much. So let me make it clear that according to the EU treaty, the responsibility for the social care and pensions and so on remains within the member states. So European Commission has no power whatsoever to engage in that. However, I want to make it clear that my institution, European Commission, is doubtful about the need to have a new contract, new convention in this specific domain. However, having said that, at the same time, I want to make it clear that there is definitely a need to address these issues. So I think our objectives are the same. The question is, how do we get from where we are to where we would like to be? So it's clear that definitely what we need is an inclusive society which would be able to sustain quality of life and also guarantee rights to all generations. So in a way, how can we achieve that? Of course, the member states are looking at the sustainability of the pension systems. There are major challenges there. Today, we know the basic facts and figures that there are about 4 active persons working to sustain one pensioner. In about 30 years from now, there will be only 2 active persons sustaining one pensioner. Having said that, I want to make it also very clear that the social contract which is there, I think, should not be changed. This is the basis of our, if you want, values, European values which are part of our society. So I think from the perspective of what we can do, I think what we would like to do is make it very clear that ageism is definitely not acceptable. So what we would like to do, of course, knowing the rights which we have and the obligations which we have from the EU treaty, is we are looking specifically on, for example, how innovation aspects, digital, can contribute improving quality of life of all citizens and specifically to the aging population. So what we are doing, we have 3 different lines of actions. First one is the strategic one. We have developed what we call a silver economy strategy. It was just adopted recently. And let me make it clear here also that when we talk about the silver economy, we are talking about people of 50 years plus. 50 years plus. So essentially, if I look around the whole here, we are nearly all part of it.
In silver economy.
In the silver economy, yeah. So 50 years plus. And what we want to do in this strategy is actually very clearly explain what are the opportunities, what are the assets there. And of course, we can talk about elderly people who have a lot of knowledge, who have a lot of experience, who are also in some parts relatively wealthy. So they have a lot of assets, if you want. And at the same time, I think if you look at the different parts of the national economies, silver economy can be a major opportunity for development. For example, we have a number of, here in Slovenia, the collapse of the construction economy. So a lot of construction companies are gone, and I think with the new development or redesign of the existing buildings to be with the objective to make them suitable for independent life of older people, we can actually boost the economy. So this is exactly, and then the second part which we are working on is in order to contribute to this agenda, we have developed a European Innovation Partnership on Active and Healthy Aging. The policy objective is to increase the independent living of older people until 2020 for plus 2 years. So we think that by independent life of older people, actually we can have, first of all, better quality of life of older people, and at the same time reduce the expenditure of the health system.
Okay.
And
I'm sorry not to agree completely, or I would like to ask you some additional questions. You are talking here, if I got you correctly, about older people who are somehow dependent and who are consumers of services produced by silver economy. But could you think a little bit how older people could contribute, you know, as innovators, as professionals, to create this silver economy, or any kind of economy, finally?
I mean, in this European Innovation Partnership on Active and Healthy Aging, we are bringing together research organizations, healthcare systems, also the elder people, the NGOs, regions, with the objective to bring them together. And of course, we have, for example, excellent studies. For example, we are deploying robots with the objective that robots would be tested, how they could be made more suitable to assist elderly people in independent life. And of course, you can say, but here elderly people are just the subject of the test. But no, it's not that case. They also say this should be changed and so on. So I think one way or the other, through appropriate partnerships, and partnership, as it has been said, is the keyword of Forum Bled this year, I think we can really make it happen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think your field is very important, because there is another myth about older people, that they do not belong, they are not affiliated to technology, and that technology and innovation belongs to young people. Only.
I agree with you, but we did a lot of surveys, analysis about how elderly generation participates in the digital society today, and some of the figures are quite worrying. A lot of, I think the share of participation of older people using internet is less than 60%. I'm talking about the average in European Union. In some member states, it's very high. In some, it's very low. But I think at the same time, a number of member states are doing excellent actions in this domain. So, for example, they are trying to bring together different generations, young and old. Younger people are actually teaching older people how to use internet, and of course the result of that is that the level of knowledge of older people is much higher than it used to be. At the same time, now older people can benefit from the digital technologies. They can communicate with their friends or family using Skype. They can engage in digital economy as well, use e-banking and so on. So I think in a way we are progressing, and are we there yet? Probably not, but I think looking at the examples also in Slovenia, we have excellent success stories there.
Learning doesn't go, one way and another way most of the times. For example, at Slovenia Third Age University, we introduced a movement which is called Each One Teach One, and there is tandem learning which is not necessarily generationally based. So people who know something give their knowledge on a voluntary basis to other people, and this generation, the age is not important here. So I think what we need is cooperation of generations in all fields. I'm sorry to insist a little bit on education, but Ilsa, you mentioned financial literacy as a very important issue in order to make people understand all the changes going around the welfare systems, the market reform, and so on. But could you please talk a little bit about this, and also about the reform which in Italy is called Riforma della Fornero? So
well, yes. First of all, I could say that I don't wish anybody to have to do a reform which has an impact on practically all families in a situation of emergency, where on the one hand you are really pushed towards strong measures. I can say that when I was preparing the reform, my colleagues and people from the DG Finance, my colleagues from the Ministry of Finance, would always say, not enough, Elsa. Not enough, you understand what it means. You have to do more.
Cuts.
More, not really cuts, more in terms of increasing working life. One of the problems of Italy, because it's very nice we have talked of changes. Changes is a word that people like. Somehow they can associate with a lot of uncertainty, so maybe they are afraid of changes. But the word that people don't like is reform, particularly when it is associated to pension reform, because they understand that a pension reform can only be something that means that you have to work longer, that your benefits are calculated possibly on a different formula that is less generous than in the past, that your pension benefit is, let's say, is increasing less with aging as it was before. So they associate the word reform to something which is really to dislike, to say the least, or to oppose. But then, I just would like to remind you that pension reform were perhaps pension reforms in Europe were top of the agenda of every important international institution, starting from the World Bank, OECD, European Commission, the IMF. They said, okay, just to tell you very briefly, in summer 2011, the European Central Bank, which I forgot to mention right now, signed a letter addressed to the Italian government saying, okay, you are in a very difficult state. We are ready to buy Italian bonds and bills, that is public debt, provided you do something. There were 6 so-called reforms mentioned in the letter, August 2011. And the first 2 were the pension and the labor market reforms, the one that I had to enact. Okay, so these institutions and the fact that they call for reform is not, which is the great ambiguous or the great mistake that people do also with the complicity of the media is not just because of saving money, because this is quite brutal. We have to reform your pension system because we need to reduce public expenditure, which is something that people, again, don't understand. Why should we do this? But the fact that you say that perhaps your pension reform is a way to restore an intergenerational pact or compact that was somehow, through the complicity of politicians, because everybody knows that increasing pension benefits is very beneficial in terms of votes. So it's much easier, I tell this to my colleague from Slovenia, it's much easier to be the labor minister when the economy is growing and you can make a promise than it is when the economy is contracting and there is the threat of a financial crisis and you have to do something. So this seems to be something that it only has negative aspects. But reforms are something different. I call a reform of this kind, labor, pension, a social investment, like a social infrastructure. What do you do when you invest? You renounce consumption today to build a house, a new road, a new bridge, a digital infrastructure. So you renounce something today in order to have something greater or better tomorrow. That is an investment. And if we think of reforms as social investment, not just as an act of cruelty against people, then people would understand better. Is it possible to achieve this? I know it's very difficult, but I think it is possible if people have an idea of what, for example, a pension system or social security scheme or social insurance schemes are about. They have to have an internal consistency between today and tomorrow. They have to respect some kind of justice. I can tell you, do you think it's right, a pension system that gives more to the rich and less to the poor? Would you consider a public pension system that rewards more the contribution of richer people and less the contribution of poor people? Would you say this is the right thing, it's a fair thing? I would say no. If it's public, and if it's redistribute, then it has to do in the right direction. And this, you know what it means? Cutting privileges. Do you think people understand what it means, cutting privileges? Yes, I do. And I do think that they appreciate this. And if you make people understand this in terms of the basic that is involved in a pension system, in what we call European welfare system, they are, in my view, less opposed. And this happens to me. The reform had a bad name, and I can assure you that it was very, very difficult from a personal point of view. But I can tell you that whenever I had the possibility to talk to people directly, to explain to them, to accept, to discuss with them, to have a real dialogue, people would be not perhaps more happier, but would understand more. And that is why I consider that economic financial literacy is not only something that is good for your personal life, because you save, you have to buy, you have to diversify your wealth and so on, but is good also, it is to me, an essential feature of what I call modern citizenship, participation in collective life and in collective decisions.
Thank you very much. Yes, I couldn't agree more, because I think we all lack this particular knowledge in the field of economics and what's going on in society. I think this is a very important part, and especially of the whole social life. And it definitely needs more knowledge. And as you said, this is a kind of civic education. I think, Vitalia, you also mentioned this civic education, and you already spoke a little bit about it, about the different stakeholders working towards the same intergenerational goal. But I was amazed by a project you launched in Georgia, and we are definitely ready to copy it by modifying it. Could you speak a little bit about it?
With pleasure. It's one of the projects that we usually engage in, building capacity of countries to develop the policies, the strategic policies, so-called roadmaps on mainstreaming aging. And the recent one was done in Georgia. And here I can count also support Elsa's statement that sometimes the policies are developed, or some reforms are developed so fast that nobody is actually consulted from outside or from the people, nor the NGOs, nor civil society, nor media, nor academics even. Only small group works on it, and it's given, and you have to take it. And then there is this confrontational mark. We work on these roadmaps within countries for a year and a half, usually, and we try to resist pressures from the government to do it fast, in 3 months. That was actually a request from Georgian government. You do it in 3 months, maximum 6. We said, yes, fine, we will go ahead. But I said to reason the minister and deputy minister, I said, look, this project is not only about the policy recommendations, but also about changing mentality and understanding in society what aging means and what aging brings in. And for that you need time, and you need engagement of all the partners. Civil society, all the people themselves, young people, media, employers, associations, etc. And we do it with organizing focus group discussions. We interview, we go to all the people homes, and etc. And along with that work that we do, comprehensive review and recommendations, we decided that how to involve all the people who seem to be neglected in that country. In a way, they didn't have any presentation or representation in the media. We did a special survey on it. It's only if it was a very famous older person who turned 70, there would be some news on TV, but not something more serious. So we thought, after visiting 2 older people homes, that we should launch essay contest among the older people, that they write essays. What does it mean, aging in Georgia? And give advice. The essays should be kind of not more than 5 pages, but should be constructed as general story or history, but also advice to the younger generation and advice to politicians. And we launched this project, and we received 47 essays altogether from different people, because it was really an element to push. People were not ready to express this easily. But when we got it, and we, of course, Georgian is a very different language. We don't read, even the script is very different. So we had to engage the translators who translated. And then we engaged a young, very prominent photographer who went to all the homes of these older people who submitted essays and took the portraits, took the photos of them in their home environment. She was very artistic, very known artistic photographer, so we organized a big exhibition in Palais des Nations of these photographs with the excerpts from these essays. And we published the book with these essays, extras of these essays with the portraits in both English and Georgian language. And he had such a huge success that last July, the Parliament organized the exhibition. Parliament of Georgia organized that exhibition in Tbilisi in the Parliament House. And the Parliament's Commission on Health and Social Affairs now is leading the preparation of plan of action for our roadmap. So this is but this hearing the voices of all the people and incorporating them in the preparation, it really made waves. Made in radio, made in media. We were in the newspapers. So this really engaged into discussion. Much more of the civil society got engaged, not only Caritas, not only the kind of charitable organizations that before, but a lot of younger generation. Ministry of Youth and Sport was all in hands to support us. So I think partnership is great, and asking from the bottom up, people who are really concerned, asking their opinion is also.
Are you going to translate, what people said in this wonderful project? Is there a possibility to translate their feelings and thoughts into a policy?
Actually is, because Georgia went through the very different period since 1990s. Civil war in part, a lot of internally displaced people, IDPs, from Abkhazia and from the other parts. So there is a lot of the things that people were actually giving quite good recommendations to the government how to address the issues of the losing everybody, losing everything. No home. We are not talking about savings that were not existent for many post-Soviet countries, but nothing. No home, no relatives, no friends when you are displaced. How to deal with it? And some people really gave very good advice. And government was looking into it. I don't know if they will manage to incorporate it, but I think that made them think.
Because this is what we usually do. What we usually do in education. We listen to the concerns of people and we translate them into educational programs and actions and so on, and it pays off. I think it's very, very valuable. I would ask, we don't have a lot of time, but I would still ask our minister maybe to tell us, are you planning any consultations we have been talking about in relation to probably to the reforms? Yes.
When we talk about making changes within society, I totally agree that the term reform is really something that we should avoid because of the feelings that is causing within people. So it's quite similar experiences in Italy we had in Slovenia. You all remember how the pension reform was rejected in a referendum. So, but not the problem of our reform at that point. It was not enough conversation, but maybe it was the process, how we see the situation, how different groups saw the situation at that point. And also there always the need within society for the compromise, because not two people could not agree how we can see what will be the best solution or best result of it. So we need to sit down and discuss and make the best decision at a certain point of time so we can manage the change. And to manage the change is really important that you try to involve all stakeholders. So you need to gear the process. For example, that was the social agreement this year. We reached to social agreement among representatives of employers and employees after more or less of six years not able to make an agreement. So it's a lot of conversation, negotiation, and so on, and all the changes within society should go on that way. But you know, the problem is when you say privilege, what is privilege? Do we agree about what is privilege within the pension system? There's not agreement about what is the privilege. So it's very difficult to have an agreement about how we can lower so-called privileges within the system, because all people within the system saw their rights as being deserved, because we are talking about insurance systems, so the rights were paid off. It's not the same when you are talking about social assistance schemes, where is redistribution from those being richer to those being poorer. But the problem is that the rights were defined within the system a few years ago, a few decades ago. But now we should, as the society, decide, do we still do the contract which was at that point of time signed is still on? And the problem, how we can prolong. So the problem of the insurance, the pension system itself is that the changes, when they introduce, they should go step by step. But it's the importance of the politics, the political parties, as well as all the other participants in the society, social partners, especially in Slovenia, because they are strong in Slovenia, is that we are steering the changes, thinking about what are the needs of the further generation, the generation following, not only to take into account what are the needs of elections, which will be in 3-4 years' time. So it's really that we need to steer the process in the perspective that we should agree how our society will look in 20 years' time. And that's the problem of the politics itself, because we are usually geared to the period between the elections. But now it's the importance of all the other partners. And for example, without social partners, without trade unions and the employers, we cannot deliver the reform in Slovenia. And we need, for example, the pension reform in 2009. It was approved, or all the scientific, all the economists signed for it. But, you know, on the referendum, it was like this. It was most of the people voted against. So that was, if you have a veto with the power of veto, as in Slovenia we have, it's impossible to gear the reforms in a such way that you don't make an broader social agreement about it. And I think it's right, because we don't have the right to say to steer to make changes, as, for example, I as a minister think that are the most appropriate. It's about the society as a whole.
Yes, it's about the consensus, definitely. The one word which comes back all the time is listening to people, especially in our economy of knowledge, where knowledge has to be shared and produced in cooperation. I would like now to invite the audience. We are ready to take your questions and answer to the extent of our abilities, of course.
Yeah, if I may take up the topic of Ms. Kopacz-Mrak, the minister said last, it's so difficult to decide what is a privilege, because everybody who enjoys a privilege thinks it's well deserved. Well, maybe with respect to concepts of justice and fairness, when it comes to social assistance, things, views may diverge a lot. But when it comes to insurance principles, we can relatively well calculate what is being paid into as a contribution and what the benefits are. And if you can show that for some categories of people, the benefits may be 30, 40, 50% above what they contributed. But there are other categories of people where they may be 200 or 300% above what they contributed. Nobody right in his or her mind may contest that this is actually not fair, because a euro contributed should be a euro received, more or less, across the generations and across occupational groups. And I think exactly when it comes to insurance principles, which is conceiving the pension system as as Nick Barr would say, a piggy bank, you contribute something and you get roughly, grosso modo, what you have been contributing. And if this is significantly and visibly violated, and if we can demonstrate that, like with the judges in the Italian system, who were not ashamed to rule as illegal what Elsa and others, did in order to curb their obvious privileges in terms of insurance principles. But they, in the end had the ultimate power to rule on their own behalf, and they decided to undo what Elsa was doing with respect to the 2011 reform, which was one of the serious components of showing to people that justice and fairness and redistribution along the insurance principles would have to prevail. And it did not in the case of judges and other quote-unquote privileged groups. So I think actually if we engage in this kind of public discourse, it should be possible to elevate the level of public dialogue and discourse, and also have an emerging consensus agreeing, because this is something which can be calculated, recalculated, decided, agreed upon, and something which can be agreed upon, you can also make decisions which are considered to be fair.
Yeah, I think you seem to be agreeing as well.
Can I respond just quickly? The logic of insurance system, it is the logic of that what you were paid you should get out of the system, but it's not within the public insurance schemes. So within the private, it's the logic. I'm paying and I will get out of it. But within, we have the solidarity principles. And within solidarity principle, then the privileges, of course there are privileges. We can discuss it. And the rational logic behind it's like you said, the economist said. But for example, in Slovenia, we could discuss too, that was within the Second World War, those who were taking part in the Second World War, those years are doubly counted. With your logic, that's the privilege, and we should cut it. But the problem is, but they weren't paid for what are getting now. So it's very difficult to calculate what are the, for example, my grandmother was working much less than I will, hopefully, But is this the concept with the privilege? The privilege are still based within the concept of time, and they are changing. And it's difficult. I understand that we need to think about, and we should discuss it when preparing the changes within system. But they are all emotional. We cannot. It would be quite easier. We made a lot of calculations. We had 1 year of the debate about it. All the calculation what will be the result if the reform will fail on the referendum, and all at the end actually the consequences we faced them, but nevertheless, that's emotional.
Let's end on this emotional point. We would like to take maybe 1 or 2 very short questions from the audience. No? Yes? No? If
May I?
Yes, please.
I actually have a question for the audience.
Oh, perfect. Thank you for that.
But a little background to my question before I get there. I really want to thank Sasha for his presentation on this other dimension for a convention. That's a very important point. HelpAge was one of the major leaders in this whole Right for Convention. I know Bridget speak from HelpAge has just been a champion for that. HelpAge was a champion for our work on the SDG, so I really appreciate their work. You know, it's true that Madrid is just, it's not a required, there's no requirement, it's not mandated like a convention would be. The same thing is true of the Sustainable Development Agenda that the UN will be passing. It's a wonderful document. I urge you all to go and read it and see the full dimension of it. It is social, economic, environmental, for all countries, for all peoples. But again, it is not mandated. It's an aspirational document, and it's up to governments to implement it. And this is where my problem comes in, how do we as civil society, as older persons, monitor this? My point is that we, at the older person at the international level, are not organized. We have HelpAge, we've got the IFA, but there are thousands of aging organizations, yet there's no mechanism for them to come to the UN as a unit and for us to get back to the now 800 million older people. There's no organizational structure to do that today. We in the Committee on Aging, we have about 80 members. Only 2 of them are paid to do the work. The rest of us are volunteers. I'm sure the same thing is true of the Committees on Aging in Geneva and Vienna. There is no structure to do this. There is no money, there is no champion. We need to get organized at the international level. I don't have the answers. I've talked to Toby, the head of HelpAge. I've talked to the head of ARP International. This is what our challenge going forward is. How do we organize to be a force at the international level? Again, to get the information down to the local level and to hear what the people want, not just from the North, not just from the developing country, but the entire world, including the developing world, the least developed countries. How do we do this? Where is the money? Where is the champion? I don't have the answers, and I hope you can help us with that.
So, thank you very much. Any other question?
Thank you. I would like to thank very much to our panelists for your really important contributions. And I'm glad that you are optimist and not pessimist, because whenever we say aging society, then we see only a lot of problems. I think that a kind of a general question is, can we change the paradigms of social development or not? If we talk about old people, we have to talk and think about old generation, or what one of you said, inclusive society. Society is aging. Is this a benefit of development or a disaster, a failure of development? We have ready-made people, more and more in a society, less and less children. There are certain laws, there are certain tendencies which the development brings with, and we have to face them with new paradigms. I don't think that we can solve the question of pension insurance counting the employed people. We can promise employment. There will be less and less employment because there are new forms of work in information society. Very dynamic, very individualized. But let us not forget that the wealth of society has been growing in the last 4 or 5 decades immensely. But problem is the distribution of these incomes which nations have. That's a problem. We try in the old way, with old paradigms, solve the problem. Like, if we discuss usually, this panel is exceptional, but if we usually come somewhere and we discuss the old people, everybody would promise some help and services and retired people homes and more nurses and so on. But the old age today is 30 to 40 years. It means a great loaf of the life. Do we have a program Are people ready to make their own program? Are these individual programs converted together, coordinated within a society? We all would wish that there is no age discrimination, that all generations are equal, considered to what one contributes to the society. Yes, the social relation is giving and receiving. Yeah. But why do we stop people at the age of 25 or 56 or 60 or 70 simply because of the age to stop the life of a person? A person is suddenly next month not allowed to do anything. Is punished if he or she works.
Can I?
And how can a person contribute?
Yes, I think this would be the final question and the food for thought. I'm really sorry because at 17:30 we are expected for the closing ceremony of the forum. But anyway, just one word to finish up this panel.
May I say something? Which is very important. We live in a democratic society, and we highly appreciate this, and we appreciate individual liberties. And so we should go in the direction of more flexibility of our work and retirement. The industrial society was rather rigid. People had to work a certain number of hours per day, certain number of days per week, and so and so. And people had to retire at one age. Nowadays, the economy is changing, also through digitalization, and I just say that it's, well, for the young now it's much more, let's say, self-entrepreneurship, which means a lot of more risk but also more liberty. And it should be possible to have flexible retirement, provided we have the right pension formula, and gradual retirement. You don't retire totally, you retire partially.
Thank you. I'm sorry we have to be on time, but thank you very much. Could you one final sentence, but really a sentence, I'm afraid?
Yeah, I will try. Reflecting on what you said, Madam, the paradigm shift in thinking on aging has been achieved. In thinking, but not in acting.
We have noticed.
And that's obvious. It's about time to move from politics, where the set of mantras have been developed, beautiful slogans, towards very concrete policy action, so that it would developing national policies not in a hush, as Elsa mentioned, in less than 3 weeks. Or in my country, as the amendments to the constitution, I'm talking about Ukraine, were developed in 3 weeks, hidden somewhere in the presidency administration. We need what it's called, and very well established and very well known, evidence-informed policy. Unless we do this with knowledge, unless we develop suitable models, very well analyzed, tried in other places, we will be talking in mantras. We will be talking politics, not policy.
Thank you. This is getting very interesting. To the wrong moment. Sorry, Zoran, maybe your last sentence.
Last sentence. Digital is not a panacea, but is a part of the answer to the challenges which we are facing.
Thank you.
I will be brief as well. I think that the aging society and demographic change should be seen as an opportunity.
Vitalia.
Yes, I think that if we manage to foster ability of all the people to contribute in all levels, paid and paid economy, living independently like we do, this potential use from our active aging index, if you heard of such. So I think in that case, in the environment where the rights are respected, we will achieve also the action, not only paradigm change.
Thank you very much. And James?
I think
about rights.
at the United Nations, we owe a great debt of gratitude to Ambassador Courtesy of Hungary and Kamau of Kenya. They opened up the process at the United Nations to social groups as never before existed in the work as we develop the Sustainable Development Agenda. And it will be up to us and the other social groups to occupy that space that they have opened to us in the future work of the UN. It's a great opportunity, but we have to rise to that opportunity.
So the last message is a great opportunity. But we have to, the last message is we have a great opportunity and we have to use it.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the audience.